Two Apache sisters collapsed at his door. The next day, their chief returned with a request that would shatter everything Jacob believed about honor and sacrifice. The winter wind howled across the barren plains, cutting through Jacob's threadbare coat like a knife. His weathered hand trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of the decision before him. 20 Apache warriors on horseback formed a perfect half-circle around his small homestead, their expressions carved from stone, their rifles aimed at his chest. Behind them, the tribal chief sat motionless on a paint horse, his face lined with decades of struggle and wisdom. Jacob's gaze fell to the two young women huddled behind him, sisters he'd found half-frozen at his doorstep just yesterday. The eldest met his eyes with a silent plea. The youngest clutched the rough wooden doorframe, her knuckles white with terror. "They want their daughters back," the translator shouted against the wind. "The chief says you have until the count of 10 to release them, or every man will fire." Jacob's throat tightened. The rifle in his hands felt impossibly heavy. If 20 rifles were aimed at your heart, would you surrender what you've sworn to protect, or stand your ground, even knowing it meant certain death? The chief raised his hand, fingers splayed. The counting had begun. 5, 4, 3. But what happened in the next heartbeat would forever alter the fate of the entire frontier. 3 days earlier, Jacob Miller had been nothing more than a failing homesteader, another victim of broken government promises and the merciless Dakota winter. The land that was supposed to bring prosperity had brought only isolation and hunger. His wife and infant son had survived neither the journey west nor the first bitter winter. Now, in his 3rd year alone, the walls of his small cabin seemed to close in with each passing day. Every morning followed the same pattern. Check the traps, chop wood, melt snow for water, repair what the wind had damaged overnight. Jacob worked until his muscles screamed, less from necessity than to exhaust himself enough to sleep without dreams. That morning, he'd managed to catch a rabbit, the first meat in nearly a week. His hands, cracked and bleeding from the cold, struggled with the skinning knife. The small victory felt hollow. What good was surviving another day when there was nothing left to live for? As he stoked the meager fire, he caught a glimpse of the faded photograph he kept above the mantel. Emily's smile, captured forever in sepia tones, seemed to mock his solitude. Beside her, the tiny bundle that had been their son James, who drew just 23 breaths in this world before surrendering to the cold. "I should have turned back," he whispered to the empty room, the words familiar on his tongue. "I should have listened." If stories of the frontier speak to your soul, consider subscribing so you never miss the next one. The blizzard struck just after midday, howling like a living thing. Jacob secured what he could outdoors, then retreated to his cabin, prepared for another long night of wind-rattled windows and creaking timber. He just settled before the fire when he heard it, a sound so faint he first mistook it for the wind, a scratching at his door. Jacob reached for his rifle, suspicion overriding curiosity. Raiders sometimes used tricks to lure lone settlers outside. But when he cracked the door, rifle raised, he found no bandits waiting. Instead, 2 young women collapsed inward, their bodies light as hollow bones as they tumbled onto his floor. Apache, by their dress and the intricate beadwork on their deerskin clothing, the elder couldn't have been more than 19. The younger, perhaps 15, both bore the unmistakable signs of starvation and frostbite. Jacob's finger hesitated on the trigger. Relations between settlers and the Apache had deteriorated over the past year. Broken trees, militia attacks, reprisals, the cycle of violence seemed endless. Taking in natives could be seen as treason by some of the more radical settlers. The elder sister lifted her head, her dark eyes meeting his. She said something in Apache, then, seeing his confusion, struggled to form English words. "Help, sister, please." The younger girl lay motionless, her breathing shallow, lips blue from cold. Jacob lowered his rifle. Whatever politics existed between their peoples, he couldn't turn away dying children from his door. "I'll help you," he said, knowing they might not understand his words, but hoping they would sense his intent. "Come to the fire." As he carried the unconscious younger sister to his bed, he noticed the fresh wound on her side, not from frostbite or hunger, but a bullet. These girls weren't just lost in the storm. They were running from something. Jacob worked through the night, using what little medical knowledge he possessed. He cleaned the wound, applied a poultice of the herbs Emily had taught him to gather, and spooned broth into their cracked lips. By dawn, the younger sister's fever had broken. The elder sat vigilant beside the bed, watching his every move with wary eyes. As morning light filtered through the grimy window, she spoke again, her English halting but clear enough. "I am Nayland. She is Tala. Men attack our camp. White men. They take others. We escape." She gestured to her sister's wound. "They shoot her." Jacob's stomach knotted. He'd heard rumors of militia raids on Apache camps, of women and children taken for ransom or worse. The territorial governor condemned such actions publicly, but did little to stop them. "You're safe here," he said, though he knew it might be a lie. If these girls had been pursued, his help could summon consequences graver than he could imagine. But his kindness would soon summon something far greater than gratitude, and far more dangerous than mere militiamen. By mid-afternoon, Tala could sit up and take food on her own. The color had returned to her cheeks, though her eyes remained distant, haunted. Nayland explained more of their situation. Their band had been camped near the Black River when raiders attacked before dawn. Their father, a respected warrior, had created a diversion so his daughters could escape. Whether he still lived, they did not know. Jacob was showing Nayland how to change her sister's bandage when hoofbeats approached from the east. He grabbed his rifle and peered through the window. 3 riders, all white men, their horses lathered despite the cold. "Inside," he hissed, motioning for the girls to hide in the root cellar beneath the floorboards. Not a sound. He'd barely closed the trapdoor when a heavy fist pounded on his door. "Open up, Miller!" "We know you're in there!" Jacob recognized the voice. Emmett Walsh, a former cavalry scout turned bounty hunter, a man who boasted of how many savages he'd sent to their ancestors. Jacob opened the door just wide enough to show his face, keeping his rifle visible. "What do you want, Walsh?" "Tracking 2 Apache squaws," Walsh said, his breath reeking of whiskey despite the early hour. "Spotted tracks heading this way before the snow covered them. You seen anything?" "Nobody passes this way," Jacob replied, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Too far from the main trails." Walsh's eyes narrowed. "Wouldn't be harboring runaways, would ya? That's a hanging offense." "Since when is it an offense to help lost travelers?" "When they're savages, it's always an offense," said one of Walsh's companions, a rat-faced man with a missing front tooth. "Those girls belong to us. Fair spoils." Jacob's grip tightened on his rifle. "There's no one here but me. Now get off my land." Walsh spat a stream of tobacco juice onto Jacob's threshold. "We'll be watching you, Miller. Always thought you were an Indian lover." His eyes scanned the cabin's interior. "Might just need to have a look around." Jacob leveled his rifle. "You've got no authority here, Walsh. Leave now, or I'll be within my rights to defend my home." For a tense moment, Walsh seemed ready to test Jacob's resolve. Then he smirked and backed his horse away. "Have it your way, but this country's changing. No room for savages or those who help them." He turned his mount. "Boys, remember this place. We might need to pay Mr. Miller another visit." Jacob watched until they disappeared over the ridge, then secured the door and helped the sisters from their hiding place. Nayland's face was taut with fear and anger. "Those men, they attack our camp. They take our cousins." Jacob knew he'd just made dangerous enemies. But looking at the sisters, children really, he couldn't find it in himself to regret his choice. "You'll stay until your sister can travel," he said. "Then I'll help you find your people. If your neighbors demanded you surrender these girls, would you hand them over to save yourself? or risk everything for strangers who share nothing but their humanity with you. Word spread quickly in frontier territories. By nightfall, Jacob spotted lanterns approaching from the direction of the small settlement 10 miles south. He counted at least 12 riders. "We have to go," Naylan insisted, trying to help her sister stand. But Tala was still too weak, her wound reopening with even the slightest movement. "There's nowhere to run in this weather," Jacob said, checking his ammunition. 6 bullets in his rifle, 12 more in his pouch. Not enough. "Get back in the cellar. I'll handle this." When the riders reached his yard, Jacob stood on his porch, rifle in hand. He recognized most of them. Farmers, shopkeepers, men he'd traded with. At their head rode Pastor Simmons, the settlement's moral authority, and beside him, Mayor Thornton. "Jacob Miller," Thornton called. "We need to talk." "Kinda late for a social call," Jacob replied. "This isn't social," said Simmons, his voice carrying the weight of judgment. "Walsh says you're harboring Apache fugitives. Girls connected to the war party that raided the Henderson place last month. 3 people dead, Miller." "Walsh is a liar and a drunk," Jacob said. "And even if I had visitors, what happens on my land is my business." "Not when it threatens the whole settlement," Thornton countered. "Those savages killed Martha Henderson's baby, bashed its head against a wall. You helping their kind makes you complicit." Jacob felt sick. He'd heard about the Henderson massacre, but the details had been confused, contradictory. Some said it was Apache, others Comanche. Some whispered it was white men disguised as Indians looking to provoke a war that would clear the natives from valuable land. "I know nothing about any raid," Jacob said firmly, "but I know what I see with my own eyes. And I've seen Walsh and his men hunting children for sport and profit." A murmur ran through the crowd. Not everyone approved of Walsh's methods, even those who feared the Apache. "Turn over anyone you're hiding," Thornton demanded. "We'll ensure they face proper justice." "Like the justice at Sandcrack?" Jacob challenged, referencing the infamous massacre where soldiers had slaughtered hundreds of peaceful Cheyenne and Arapaho. "No, there's no one here, but if there were, I wouldn't surrender children to a lynch mob." Pastor Simmons dismounted, approaching closer. "Jacob, I understand your loss has made you different, more isolated. But consider what you're doing. These people are not like us. They don't value life as we do." Jacob laughed bitterly. "I've seen little value for life on either side, Pastor, but I know right from wrong. Your stubbornness puts us all at risk," Thornton warned. "Their people will come looking for them." "Then go home," Jacob suggested. "Be nowhere near when they do." The men conferred among themselves, voices low but heated. Finally, Thornton addressed Jacob again. "We're giving you until morning to reconsider. Either produce these fugitives, or we'll assume you're an enemy of this settlement. No man will trade with you. No doctor will attend you. You'll be as dead to us as your poor wife and child." The cruel words struck like physical blows, but Jacob held his ground. Dawn, then. As the riders departed, Jacob sank onto his porch steps, the cold seeping into his bones. Naylan emerged from the cabin, sitting silently beside him. "Why you help us?" she asked finally. "They your people." Jacob stared into the darkness where the riders had vanished. Not anymore. And in that silence, the land itself seemed to hold its breath, as if sensing the approaching storm would change everything forever. If you were trapped between betrayal and death, would you surrender what's right or stand alone against impossible odds? Jacob spent the night reinforcing his windows and doors, creating firing positions, preparing for a siege he knew he couldn't win. Tala watched him from the bed, her dark eyes following his movements. "You should leave us," she said, her English clearer than her sister's. "Save yourself." "And go where?" Jacob asked, ramming a chair under the door handle. "This is all I have left." Dawn broke with an unnatural stillness. No birds sang, No wind stirred the bare branches. Jacob peered through a gap in the boarded windows, expecting to see Thornton and his men approaching from the south. Instead, he glimpsed movement from the east, a single rider on the horizon, then another and another. Within minutes, the entire ridge was lined with mounted warriors, their feathered lances stark against the pale sky. "Your father?" Jacob asked Nylon, who had joined him at the window. She squinted, then shook her head. "Not father, Chief Macaw, the council leader." Jacob's mouth went dry. "How many warriors does he command?" "All of them," Nylon replied simply. The Apache warriors descended into the valley with disciplined precision, forming a perimeter around the cabin. Jacob counted at least 40 men, all armed. At their center rode an elder warrior on a paint horse, his face deeply lined, his silver hair in 2 long braids beneath an eagle-feathered headdress. A lone rider approached the cabin, stopping 30 paces from the porch. He wore white man's clothes beneath a traditional blanket, one of the reservation interpreters. "The chief wishes to speak with the white man who shelters the daughters of Kichi," he called. Jacob glanced at Nylon, who nodded. "Kichi, our father," she confirmed. "Great warrior, chief's friend." Jacob unbarred his door and stepped onto the porch, rifle held loosely at his side. "I'll speak with him." The translator relayed his words. Chief Mahaka studied Jacob for a long moment, then dismounted with the fluid grace of a much younger man. He approached until he stood at the foot of the porch steps, close enough that Jacob could see the intricate tattoos on his weathered face. The chief spoke, his voice deep and resonant, each word measured. The translator followed. "Chief Mahaka says the daughters of his blood brother Kichi are sacred to the people. Their father died defending the camp from white raiders. Before dying, he sent a message that his daughters had fled toward the rising sun." The translator paused. "The chief asks why a white man would risk his life for Apache children." Jacob considered his answer carefully. "I did what any decent man would do. They needed help. Nothing more." When his words were translated, something like amusement flickered in the chief's eyes. He responded, a longer speech this time. "The chief says white men speak of decency but practice cruelty. He has watched your settlement grow on land promised to his people. He has buried children killed by white men's diseases and white men's bullets. He asks what makes you different." Jacob had no grand answer, no profound wisdom. "I have buried a child too," he said simply. "I know what it means to lose family." As the translator spoke, a murmur ran through the assembled warriors. The chief's expression remained impassive, but something shifted in his posture. He reached inside his buckskin shirt and withdrew a small object, a tarnished silver pocket watch. With deliberate movements, he opened it to reveal a faded photograph inside, a white woman holding an infant. Jacob's breath caught. That's my wife, my son." "Where did you get that?" The translator relayed his question, and the chief's response sent a chill through Jacob's body. 2 winters ago, Chief Maka found a white woman and baby half buried in snow, their wagon broken. The woman was dying, but gave the chief this watch. She asked him to find her husband and tell him she tried to turn back. The baby was already with the spirits. Jacob staggered as if struck. "Emily tried to come back to me," he whispered. "She was trying to come home." The chief continued, his words measured through the translator. "The chief honored her request. He buried them properly and has carried this message waiting. He believes the Great Spirit has answered, bringing you together through his brother's daughters." Jacob's hands trembled as he accepted the watch. Inside, beside the photograph, a small lock of infant hair, golden like his own, had been carefully preserved. "Thank you," he managed, tears freezing on his cheeks. "The chief says a debt exists between you. You saved what is precious to him. He saved what was precious to you, though only in memory." Jacob nodded, unable to speak. The chief raised his voice, addressing both Jacob and his warriors. The translator struggled to keep pace. Chief Macaw says the white settlement sends riders, 20 men approaching from the south. He offers you a choice. Give him his brother's daughters, and he will ensure your safety from these men. Or keep the girls and face your people's judgment alone. They're not my people, Jacob said firmly, and the girls stay until they choose to leave. The chief's weathered face revealed nothing as he received the translation. He spoke again, more urgently. The chief says you misunderstand. He asks for his brother's daughters not to punish them, but to protect them. And he makes you an unthinkable request, to come with them, to become one of the people. He says a man who would die for children not his own has a spirit that belongs with them. Jacob blinked in shock. He wants me to join the Apache? The chief nodded solemnly. Kindness may cost me my life, Jacob said slowly, but turning away would have already killed my soul. Tell him I accept. When translated, the chief's face broke into a smile that transformed him. He clasped Jacob's arm in a warrior's grip, then turned to his men, issuing rapid commands. Half the warriors moved to intercept the approaching settlers. The rest formed a protective circle around the cabin. Nyalin had emerged onto the porch, supporting her sister. The chief embraced them both, speaking softly in their language. Tears streamed down their faces as he told them of their father's fate. Jacob retreated inside to gather what few possessions mattered: his rifle, Emily's photograph, a small bag of seeds she had carried west. Outside, he could hear hoofbeats approaching, Thornton and his men, no doubt. When he emerged, the chief had positioned 20 warriors in a half-circle facing the oncoming settlers, the rising sun at their backs. He motioned for Jacob to stand beside him, with the girls behind them. Thornton's posse drew up short, unnumbered and suddenly uncertain. Walsh pushed to the front, his hand hovering over his pistol. "God damn it, Miller! You've brought them down on us all!" "The Apache were here long before us," Jacob replied calmly. "I'm just accepting their hospitality." The translator conveyed his words to the chief, who barked a laugh and clapped Jacob on the shoulder. "Tell your people to go home," the chief instructed through the translator. "This man and these children are under my protection. Any harm to them is harm to all Apache." Walsh sneered. "You're turning your back on your own kind to run with savages? You're a traitor, Miller." Jacob met his gaze steadily. "I'm choosing a people who honor their word and protect their children." "What does that make you, Walsh?" For a breathless moment, it seemed violence would erupt. Then Pastor Simmons urged his horse forward, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "We'll withdraw," he announced, "but know this, Miller, you can never return. You're dead to us." Jacob nodded, feeling lighter than he had in years. "I died here 3 winters ago. Today, I start living again." The settlers retreated, Walsh's curses fading on the wind. Chief Macaw mounted his horse and motioned for Jacob to ride with Nayland, while Tala was carefully placed on a travois. As they crested the eastern ridge, Jacob looked back at his cabin, the place of his greatest sorrow and, unexpectedly, his salvation. The chief followed his gaze. "You leave nothing behind that matters," the translator conveyed. "The chief says a home is not walls and roof. It is the people who would die to protect you." 3 months later, as spring turned the valleys green, Jacob sat outside his new lodge, teaching Apache children English words while they taught him their language. His beard was braided now, his skin darkened by the sun. The tribe had moved north for the summer hunting, far from the white settlements. Nayland approached, carrying a water skin. In the month since their escape, she had become his guide to Apache ways, patient with his mistakes, quick to defend him from skeptics within the tribe. "The children learn fast," she observed, sitting beside him. "Faster than you." Jacob laughed. "My tongue wasn't made for your language, but my heart learns quickly enough." She smiled, a rare gift he had come to treasure. "Chief Macaw asks if you will join the council fire tonight. The elders wish to hear your thoughts on the new treaty offered by the fort commander." "I'm honored," Jacob said, "though I don't know what wisdom I can offer." "You see both worlds," Nayland replied simply. "Few men can do this." That evening, as he took his place in the council circle, Jacob realized how completely his life had transformed. He had lost everything, and in that loss found a new beginning. The chief had given him a new name, Nastas, meaning curve like a fox, honoring his cunning in protecting the girls. As the council discussed the proposed treaty, Jacob offered insights into the white settlers' thinking, the army's tactics, the weaknesses in their promises. When he finished speaking, the chief nodded in approval. "Nastas speaks with a straight tongue," he told the gathering. "He has proven that not all white men have forked words. Because of him, we will seek peace, but a peace with open eyes." Later, as the stars emerged above the camp, Tala, now fully recovered, brought her sister and Jacob a portion of the feast. The three sat together on a bluff overlooking the valley. "My father would be proud," Tala said quietly, "that his daughters found a brother among the white men." Jacob looked at the young women who had changed his fate. "I think perhaps we all found what we needed most." Nayland touched the eagle feather the chief had given Jacob, now woven into his hair. "The people have a saying, 'The greatest storms bring the deepest roots.' You have put down roots among us, Nastastas." As moonlight silvered the plains below, Jacob thought of Emily, of the son he'd never known, of the life he'd left behind. For the first time, the memories brought not just pain, but a gentle peace. They had led him here, to this moment, to these people who had become his family. "This was only the beginning of a bond that would defy generations," he murmured, "and change the course of two worlds." In the years that followed, Jacob Miller, known now as Nastas, would become a bridge between cultures, helping negotiate treaties that saved thousands of lives on both sides. His adoption into the tribe became legendary, a story told around campfires and in settler cabins alike. The cabin, where two desperate sisters had once collapsed, remained standing, a silent monument to a moment when compassion overcame prejudice, when a single act of kindness rippled outward to touch countless lives. Would you have the courage to leave behind everything you know, to defend what you believe is right, to find family among those you were taught to fear? Subscribe for more powerful frontier stories like this one, and click on the video on the screen to watch the next one, with a twist so unexpected it will stay with you long after the final word is spoken.